Hey everyone, welcome back to your favorite sales podcast. I'm your host, Ross Rich, and today we have another special guest. We have someone from ServiceNow. You might have heard of them, kind of dominated and created a market over the last, let's call it decade or so, and off the races for another big year. So, Ed, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here, Ross.
Awesome. Well, as sales director, I'll let you do a quick intro here. But before we get into the details around revenue execution and excellence, would love to hear a bit about yourself and your journey to sales leadership, especially in the enterprise space.
Of course. Well, we're sitting here in January 25. So first one back at this for you, and it's my first pod for a while. So please go gently. But yeah, it's January 25. It's actually my 19th Q1. Can you believe? So
There we go.
I've been in enterprise. I know I don't look that old. It's a good skincare regime, especially for all those listening on the pod. But I joke. It's 19 years. It's 19 of these. I've worked in enterprise selling across kind of three different, very distinct industries, actually. So I started out on a graduate scheme in the telecoms industry, believe it or not. So working for Vodafone. I don't know if you're aware of those guys, but they're
Yeah.
the world's largest telcos. They're UK headquartered. And I spent the first kind of chunk of my career there selling telco services and products B2B in the corporate space. And then I moved and went completely different and moved into the startup world actually. And I built a startup with no brand or category recognition from scratch. Over a few years, it was one of the most fun rides ever, and all the way through to acquisition actually, which was fantastic. And then latterly, the last decade or so, I've worked in I guess you could call them two of the largest SaaS platforms of all time, right? I was 7 years at Salesforce, first as an enterprise and then strategic AE, before finally spending my last 2 years there in sales leadership. And and then I joined ServiceNow 18 months ago, where I'm one of the sales directors in our UK business. So I look after two of the enterprise verticals. So I've got business services and healthcare life sciences under me. So there's a bit of a whistle stop tour all the way from London to you, Ross.
Awesome. Appreciate it. But yeah, no, I think especially the last couple companies you worked at, some of the, kind of legendary how to sell in the enterprise has come from and some of the best leaders. So really excited to get your take on what you've learned through, you said 19 Q1s,
Yeah.
which is, where the real stuff is learned.
Happily only, funnily enough, I say 19 Q1s. Probably for the first 10 of those, I wasn't even aware of what a Q1 really was. It wasn't a big thing, but you get into SaaS and it becomes much more quarterly, right? So
Totally.
it's more of a thing. I was doing the things that or starting to do the things that I now do very consciously and that I coach very consciously, unconsciously for a while. Then, like you say, joining Salesforce at the back end of 2017 when it was just this phenomenal growth engine. It's still amazing today, but back then, wow, was amazing, and it really, really drove me on as a seller. I hadn't worked on any multi-million deals before I joined Salesforce, and now that's kind of my thing. So it was really fun, kind of starting on that trajectory and learning, and we'll cover some of the brilliant things that I always look to do as an AE, and now I coach and look for in AEs in Q1 at the start of the year, because for me this is the best time. Never mind the stress of the close. I'm all about the start of the deal and the start of the year, and the way that AEs and account teams can get themselves prepped for a massive year ahead.
Totally. Yeah. If you don't want to be stressed, this is the time to work hard. That's what I try to share with my teams is, the work that you put in now will help you on those, weekends and, end of the quarter pushes. So,
Oh my
yeah,
God. Look, this is where it's funny because it's natural. Not every company has a huge hockey stick towards Q4, but it is quite common. Certainly in the businesses I've worked in. But this is where heroes are made. It's easy to think the heroes are made when the deals are closed,
yeah,
but the heroes are made in the next 6 months, the start of the year, particularly if you're looking at doing large transactions. So, I'm excited today to talk a bit about my experiences in how to set people up doing that, because I know it's something that loads and loads of people want to do. They want to close their first, mega deal, as they seem to now be being called. I just like to think of them as like 7 or 8 figure deals, right? But these big deals, but they're not quite sure where to start. So yeah, having had quite a bit of experience doing that, it's going to be fun to talk about some of the things that might help people along the way. And if there's a few tips and tricks people take away, then we're doing our job right.
Totally, totally. Well, the three things we're going to dig into first, always start with the people side of things. We're going to be talking about being a leader versus a lone wolf. The
Yes.
second we're going to talk about is having a point of view. And I love your
Mm.
quote here is how do we have an impact on our customers' share price? Not just thinking about, kind of if we want to get multi-million dollar deals, you need to be thinking about solving big problems and being potentially a small part of a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And then third, we're going to talk about telling your story. The quote here, which I'll learn more about what you mean by this, is get the fish on the table. So maybe to start with the people side of things. Yeah, what do you mean by the importance of being a leader versus a lone wolf? Since I think a lot of the reputation that sometimes these multi-million dollar sellers have is kind of going out there and figuring out themselves.
And making it happen, right?
Yeah.
And look, that sometimes is the case, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm going to caveat this by saying that. But when through the glory days when budgets were wide and available and heroes were being made left, right, and center, right? When it was a touch easier than it is today in the macroeconomic light, it was possible to do that, particularly on a single or kind of couple of product-led sell. But I've always been absolutely fascinated by the dynamics that are required to land a large, as we call them, multi-workflow, but multi-product, right? In the kind of in the platform sense, how to land a platform with a customer in a way that gets them truly excited, that fixes those board level problems, C-suite problems that can affect a share price. And we'll come on to kind of how we build a story for that in a minute. But the only way really today you can do that is by taking a whole army of people with you. So, as enterprise sales has evolved, as the whole world of customer success has become a huge thing now, these relationships aren't one and done. They're absolutely going to be over multi, years, decades. Think about Salesforce, who I used to work for, they're 25 years old. ServiceNow are, the best part of the similar sort of 15, I think. So there's going to be customers that have been with these companies for a long time. And therefore, the single salesperson being the only person they ever talk to is that world's changed. And actually, if your aspiration this year, next year, whenever, over the next few years is to land a truly transformational engagement, you're not doing that on your own. You're going to need a whole bus, an army that comes along with you. So the role of what sometimes gets called the core account seller or the lead account seller or the strategic account seller or the client director or, the person who's in charge of the commercial relationship has had to evolve as a result. It's not about getting in and doing all of the work yourself. It's about bringing in the power of your company to your customer. And actually, there's far more akin with a traditional team leadership, team management role in that than there is the more traditional sales role that lots of us grew up doing. So, I kind of cottoned onto this quite early on in my time at Salesforce. I saw that there was just a huge amount of amazing, smart resource that if I could go and get an unfair share of, that I could totally use to leverage driving big engagements with my customers. So, back in the day when people were talking about internally about our competitors, they talk about other companies. I didn't see the competition as other companies. I saw competition as all of my peers. I wanted an unfair share of all of the people that supported all of us working with me. And that led to, by the end, it led to me having multiple different salespeople from different products working on my account. I ended up running one large account, a UK grocery chain. I had multiple different salespeople, probably upwards of 15. I had, the traditional business development functions for all the different products. I had customer success people. I had execs that were peered into the account. I had delivery partners. Oh God, there was about 65 people in the Slack channel for our account team. And my job was not to be the point seller. My job was to be the general of that, that group of people, that army that were out there. And it was fundamentally my role to set direction, to give them the picture of success, to set expectation and drive accountability and orchestration in these different teams. And that for me is far closer to what I do today, ironically, as a sales leader, than it was what I was doing back when I was building Walkbase and I was the first salesperson in the door in my startup days, or back when I was working in the telecoms industry. So it's it's about having that mindset that says, there's all these people around me. How am I gonna get them engaged in my pursuit? How am I gonna make, you know, those 10 people that I need more interested in working with me than with my peers? And, you know, experience tells me that that's down to kind of three key things. It's about having a really clear vision for the business that you're working with, right? I am going to go and grow this account by X amount of $1 million over the next 3 years. We are going to attach ourselves to this transformation that's going on inside the customer, and we are going to enable it faster, bigger, better, more valuable, whatever it is, right? The story is the story. And then it's about going and telling and selling that story internally to people. It's about treating them like a team. It's
Yeah.
about, we've got a wonderful phrase here at ServiceNow. It's one of our values actually, called create belonging. It's about creating belonging in this virtual account team. How on earth do you engage, you know, in my case, 65 people in your pursuit when they could all spend their time elsewhere? None of them are paid to work for me specifically. None of them did. I had no authority over them. Well, I created a sense of belonging in the team that was working with me. And I did that in lots of different ways. I did that in the more traditional ways of, you know, setting up kickoffs and having team meetings and all that fun stuff. And I also did it in really untraditional ways. I got everybody in the team a personalized Lego figure, which is a bit of a silly thing to do, which is like a little mascot for the team. And I sent them out with a little note at the start of the year to say how excited I was that they were working with me. Little things like that go a big way with people I've found over the years. So yeah, there's a couple of little tips and tricks for how you do that. But you also need to when you're starting to build this out, you need to give people a vision. You need to give people a story to tell. And the method that I've used for many years now to do that is called the picture of success. Something that I learned from a coach that I work with who actually works with what we call football managers. You guys in North America probably call soccer coaches, professional ones. And it's about taking a big vision and breaking it down into really actionable chunks for teams to go and deliver. And it really helps with creating both buy-in but also accountability, you know, and letting them go and do their best work for you. And then, you know, the final part of that, which is always the one that I think a lot of people miss at the start, is showing people that you're, you know, being human, basically showing them that you're going to tap into their individual human traits and motivations and drivers, right? So, you know, I do this, it's easier now. I've only got a team of 8 client directors to look after, Ross. But back in the days when I was working with lots and lots and lots of different people in and around my accounts, I'd actually get to know what drove them, what motivated them. I'd ask them, why are you doing this job? It's far easier ways you could make money than this. Yeah, okay, you can make a fortune in SaaS and in sales in SaaS, but like, what drives you? What gets you out of bed? And I'd try and tap into that if I could through the different engagements with them through the years. So yeah, there's quite a bit in that, but I guess to summarize, it's about thinking differently about your role. If you're leading one of these teams, you're going after 1, 2, 3 big enterprise accounts, you've got to take an army of people with you to be really successful.
Totally. And I think one thing that, you know, stands out that I learned as well from doing larger deals is you kind of need to sell internally as much as you sell
More,
externally.
more,
And I think that's
honestly,
something, yeah,
more. Because not only are you selling for resource, but you're selling for buy-in, particularly if you're involving your own execs. You know, that's the fastest way, right, to get into a transformation, a deal. But particularly at this time of year in Q1, as much as I advocate for my team to spend as much time as possible with end customers, a big chunk of it's got to be in how are you setting up your own internal team and story to get the resource that you need and drive it forwards. And you know, sometimes you might have an account that isn't the sexy, snazzy one that everyone wants to go and work on. So how do you make it sexy and snazzy? How do you make people see that actually working on it with you is going to help them hit their number? It's going to help them get promoted. It's going to help them, whatever they want to do, whatever they're trying to achieve, because you've learned that through asking them, obviously. You then help tap into that and see if you can get them bought in. But you're right, there is a huge amount of internal work that goes into this before you're even talking to a customer.
totally. Yeah. One trick for that, and maybe we can move on to the next topics. We have time to hit all 3 of these. Is the cheat code of getting execs bought in on deals, I think is key, because you're talking about, you know, why do some other people care? Well, the easiest way of getting other people in your company to care is getting a senior leader excited and bought into and kind of personally motivated by the deal. Also, that's who on the other side is going to be likely the biggest needle mover for getting something
Mm.
across the line that's in the multi-billions. So, and I think some people just don't ask. That was my experience, at least. I don't know about the companies you've worked at, is people were just afraid to ask. Um,
Their own
right.
execs.
Yeah, their own execs. Yeah, they're afraid to
Oh
go to
man.
them. They're the most excited. I think this is like the best. When I talk to them, they're like, this is the most fun I've
Yeah.
had working at the company this year, is working on a deal, because they have so much other stuff that they're
Mm.
doing that's kind of minutia, especially at larger businesses. It's like working on an exciting deal and partnering with another exec is
Yeah.
probably like
It's
the
what
most
they
fun of
used
their
to do.
week. They want
It's
to
what they
win.
used to do. It's the reason
Yeah,
they've got to where they are now. Yeah, 100%.
exactly.
And look, I'll tell you a personal story. I closed my first multi-million net new logo actually deal at Salesforce 2018. I didn't involve an exec R side at all, and I thought that was a good thing. But actually, I think I left a ton of money on the table that I absolutely, if I'd brought someone in to help me early, it would have absolutely changed the game. And I almost went through the progression of it. Then the next one I did, I brought the exec in late to help me close it. Again, that's really stupid, because then all they end up doing is basically giving discount away at the end. That's not great. And by the time I got to the big strategic account, worked my way up, I involved the exec from the beginning. They were in the kickoff right at the start when we started it, because having exec sponsors, not a sponsor, but sponsors,
Mhm.
is super important, right? You need to map, and sometimes it's not as simple as going, oh, I'll map a CFO to a CFO, but sometimes it is that simple. That's kind of good, but it's about having them helping you and selling with you from the beginning, because then they've got the relationship already. It makes that phone call in Q4 when you need to get it over the line, or when something's cropped up in the negotiation, much easier for them to make than if they've just been bought in at the end and it's a bit of a parachute late and they're trying to save the deal. And they don't like doing that either. I hate it when I have to do that. So why I'd much rather have a relationship with someone and be able to just send them a quick text or something similar.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, we could talk about this one thing probably for the whole episode, but I know we have a couple
We
other
could
things
easily.
also to touch on, which tie in really well with this, which
Mm,
is building a point of view.
yeah,
And your quote, how can we impact our customers' share price, not
yeah.
just be, the features and functionality. So yeah, would love to get your take on this. And, shout out to the late Skip Miller of M3 Learning. This was a big unlock for myself and our team back at Stripe, was
I
how do you
bet.
be a small part of the biggest problem? Because most deals are lost, classically, if you read any sales book, by the status quo. Well, you know what's
Yep.
definitely changing? Their number one priority for the year. And even if you're a small part of that, guess what? They're not
Yep.
deprioritizing that. So
100%. And I I love that expression. I've not heard there had to be a small part of a big problem before. I'm borrowing that, if that's okay. I have
it
my team.
simplifies it, right? It's like, hey,
It,
you don't
no,
have to be this whole thing. If you
not
pick the priority is more important than the solution itself. Yeah.
100%. And the more I think about it, I've been sort of, since you mentioned that earlier, I've been thinking through some of the larger deals I've worked on over the years, and it's always the case, right? You're never just the solution. It's impossible for you to be right. Otherwise, it is. But yeah, the whole concept about share price is really simple, right? I'm really lucky to start with. I'm going to get this out there. So this whole idea of engaging execs, I had a huge foot up because my dad was one.
Mm,
So later in his career, admittedly, but when I was in my teens, the people he'd bring, have barbecues with or whatever, come around for dinner and we'd meet, whatever, his friends from work were people in the C-suite. So I've never put them on a pedestal in quite the same way as I've seen other people do. They're all people, they're all human beings. You need to learn to communicate with them in a certain way. But they're humans, right? And I'm sure you know that too, and you've seen that too. You are one, of course. You're the CEO of your organization. So, and you're a person, you've got your own things going on, kids that need dropping off at school or whatever, all the different things that life throws at you, right? But so that's the first thing to think about, is that you need to start with the people that you're targeting. If you want to land a really transformational deal for your company, whether that is $1 million, because that's a big deal for what you do, or $20 million, because that's a big deal for what you do, or 60 or 100 or 5 or whatever, pick the number, it doesn't matter, whatever you sell. You've got to start with, what are the people that are going to ultimately be signing this deal off? What are they caring about this year, right now?
mm,
Right. And the world that we are living in has never been as disrupted as it is today. And you can say that every year, thankfully. So I probably rolled that out on a podcast last year, but it's never been harder to be an exec in an organization, particularly a large organization. So when you're starting to think about your POV, when you're doing your account research, you've got to do it solely through the eyes of the CEO of that organization, the CEO and the CFO. They're the two people you need to get to today. I'd have said, 2023 and 24, I'd actually would have said CFO than CEO. I think the CFOs were in control through that period, certainly over here in Europe, more than anything when it came to spend and sign off. I think it's starting to flip back, but you need to think about what those people are prioritizing. What are the challenges that they're facing as an organization? What is stopping them growing, right? That's the one thing. If you're in the box seat in a large organization, particularly one that's listed on one of the various stock exchanges around the world, number one thing everyone wants to see is, are you growing? Are you growing at the right rate? How much is it costing you to grow? All those things. So tailoring a story in your POV that talks to what these people care about right now, today, in whatever guise, is critical. I'd actually go as far as to say it's almost become a bit of a hygiene factor. If you're not doing that, you're probably not going to get your deal over the line. You're probably just selling a product like you have been, and you'll probably find that the spend for that product is not going to be there in the way that it was 2 or 3 years ago. So it's about tailoring that. And I always like to think, when talking to people about researching accounts, you have to think like not only you're the CEO, but also like you want to get a job there, right? You need to understand their organization really well. So yes, absolutely read the annual reports. That's really important, or get ChatGPT too, as most seem to be doing now. But you've got to go deeper than that, right? You've got to go really deep. When I've led big accounts in the past, I actually used to try and turn my LinkedIn feed into a customer feed. I'd add and follow so many people from that customer. I could see what was going on. I could feel their tone of voice, and I could then start to align my POV to it. And then lastly, because, again, I could easily talk about this for an episode, probably 2 episodes for us. You've got to get the hook right for the small part of the big problem that you're solving. So it isn't okay to just talk about your product. It isn't okay to talk generically about a growth challenge that they might have, or a growth opportunity they might have. You've got to be it's got to be a hook. It's got to almost be like back in the days of email marketing. You've got to get that subject line hook perfect for this, right?
Yeah.
Because
short and something that'll break through the noise.
Short, snappy, and it'll break through the noise. So I landed a deal a few years ago with the UK's largest pet retailer. So they literally sell everything you could imagine for dogs, really. They're not really pets, but dogs. I bumped into the CEO at lunch, and I said to him, I'd done loads of research, loads of work off the bat, bumped into a CEO at lunch, and I introduced myself, and I said, I was really interested in the talk you gave. He'd just been on stage, and I said, just out of interest, you know that my mum is your best customer. And I said, and that's a big problem for you. And he looked at me and went, what?
That's a great hook. That's a great hook.
I said, do you know my mum's your best customer? He went, what? Who's this guy? And I said, if I were you, I'd want my best friend to be your best customer, because they're 32 years old. They've not got married yet, not had kids yet, and they're spending 5 times what my mum spends on her dog on theirs. And you're not engaging that person at all. And there are millions of them out there in the UK. And instantly I got his attention. And from there it flowed, right? So it's whether you meet them in person like that, you doorstep them at a conference, lunch, or whether you're doing it via email, whether you're doing whatever, whether you're doing it via one of your execs, you have to have something compelling. It's got to link back to one of their big problems right now.
Yeah. And challenge them somehow, right? That's what I think people are so afraid of, I think, is well, they're this big person and blah, blah, blah. Like, I want to be respectful. Didn't you just sound like everyone else? Hi, like, thank you so much for reading this note and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, who's this person? Like, I'm not going to learn anything from them, but
hope you're keeping well, And like, what was brilliant actually was at the end of that conversation, it's really funny you say that. At the end of that conversation, Peter, his name was, the CEO, turned around to me and went, who are you and who do you work for? I was like, brilliant, that's great. He doesn't know my business, but he's interested in me. After we'd agreed that he'd introduce me to his chief digital officer and his CIO, the people I wanted to get to know, he's like, just who are you and who do you work for? That's like, that you've nailed it, right? I've got a colleague that always says the customer shouldn't know the name of the product until they sign the contract. Like, it should be about the problem that you're solving. That's the point. That's the whole thing. So your POV's got to hit those things. It's got to have a real hook that people can get in and buy behind, because I'm not the best person to talk to you about this, but there's a million amazing people talking about the concept of how buying has changed, right? But the selling that's going on when you're not in the room by your exec champion, by your mobilizer, like it has to start with that hook. So you might as well start with your POV and get that built, and then it flows through from there. And the other top tip I'm just going to give when talking about this, because again,
Yeah.
as I said, we could do a whole episode on this. Um, it's absolutely okay to include numbers in your hook and in your POV. You should, right? Like execs talk in numbers at their brief and they talk in numbers, but it's absolutely not okay to talk in absolutes. It always makes me laugh when I see these things. We could save you 218 million, or we could help grow your sales by 332 million and $32, or whatever it is. It's like nonsense. Ranges. Execs work in ranges on
And
almost
percentages. Yeah.
every percentages and ranges, absolutely. In almost every single communication they receive, whenever they're signing off for a project, it's not going to cost exactly X amount dollars and X amount cents, or X amounts pound and X amounts pence. It's going to cost between X and Y. So start there. We think we could help you achieve X% more sales, which equates to da da da, makes a massive impact on the way that you communicate. It also doesn't hold you to something, and it makes you look far more credible in the C-suite.
Totally. Yeah. Talk like them. Yeah, exactly. Well, just so we have time, the last couple of minutes here to talk about the
Sure.
last piece, because I really want to know what get the fish on the table means and telling your story. So why don't you kick us off with that?
Okay, cool. I'll put you out your misery on the get your fish on the table. I stole this from our UK MD, Damien. I love it. It's brilliant. Get your fish on the table means literally get your idea out in front of them so it can start stinking up the room. Because the sooner you have it on the table, the sooner they can buy in or out of it, the sooner they qualify in or out of it, right? Now, here's the art of doing that in a way that engages them. I don't think about any say you've let's just talk through a scenario actually rather than before we get into it, right? You've got a really compelling hook. You've got their attention. They've given you time. You've got to make that meeting, that X amount of minutes. Normally it's quite short, right? 30 minutes tops an hour with these people. You've got to make it so compelling you get the action you want off the back of it, right? This isn't about selling the whole deal. This is about getting the buy-in. You've
Yeah.
got to treat that whole piece like theater. Literally, like theater. It means rehearsals.
Yeah.
It means what's that wonderful expression? Was it Mark Twain? If you want me to speak for an hour, I need 1 minute's preparation. If you want me to speak for a minute, I'm going to need weeks to prepare. It's something along that. I'm paraphrasing, but
Yeah.
it's right lines, right? That is the essence of it. I see way too many people work really, really hard to get a meeting and then don't put the required hours in to prepping it. I'm talking
Yeah.
run, I'm talking rehearsals, I'm talking having people from your leadership team in the room playing specific roles, having given them the brief of what you want them to play and the personality, if you've got it, of the person, right? The challenges, give them a crib sheet of the questions to throw at you and have them do it. I'm talking about thinking about the storytelling, right? You've had some brilliant speakers on in the past on the subject of storytelling. It's a craft that I think every seller in 2025 needs to dive into. That and business acumen. Christ, if we got more people just thinking about those two areas, the industry would go up. And it's certainly both areas that I spend a lot of time coaching and thinking about, but thinking about the flow of the story, whether you go with, there's multiple different story methodologies, whether it's hero's journey, whether it's, whatever, like really, really spending time on that before you get in is going to make a huge difference for you in the room. Um, be brief, be bold, be gone, as I was always taught. And that's very true. You need to be compelling as well, though. You need to gain their excitement and attention because, the worst thing that you're going to see in one of those meetings, it's not going well when someone picks up a phone and starts reading it in the room, right? You've got to keep them hooked and
Yeah.
in the room. And that is about preparation, and it's about thinking about the storytelling hooks and the flow. I have a personal hatred of presentations that have anything more than 7 slides. If you can't tell your story in 7 slides, if you can't tell you've not done enough work refining it, right? All these decks, these first call decks and whatever that I've got.
I think it makes people feel comfortable. I think that's where it comes
Oh,
from.
they're a
I
crutch,
think the amount of information that you have, and I see this a lot of like, the classic, if you've heard of the expression, like below the line, above the line, like below the lines,
yeah.
like the doers, above the lines, like the executives. And kind of tied to your last point is like you come across below the line and like you're trying to be comfortable by having all this information. You're confident, conviction, and talking like them. If you have like you said, the bold summaries of the point that you're trying to make and being like, do you want to work on this thing or not? And if you're picked the right problem, it's probably
Yeah.
going to be an opt-in. And then, hey, work with my team on the details. Don't give me the
Yeah.
details, or I'm going to give you my team.
100%. And actually, really, your ask should be that. It's really simple. Like, I've finished almost every executive pitch, presentation, whatever you want to call it, with two questions. What caught your attention? Like, really great one. If they've been quiet but listening, which often happens, because people will give you they'll give you the focus. What caught your attention from today? Which basically is you saying, like, where should I prioritize my time with you? And then once you go, right, cool. I understand it's ABC person that leads this area for you. Can you do me a quick note? And can I come back to you in 6 weeks with a template for how we move forwards or whatever? It works every time, because that's all they want to do, is get it off their plate, out to someone whose responsibility it is, and then have clarification from you that you'll come back and let them know how it's gone. Because they're not gonna, they're giving you effectively, they're putting their weight behind you. So really important you keep them clued in. That's simple. But getting your fish on the table is all about getting your story out and being as brief as possible, and then see whether it stinks up the room or not. And I hope it doesn't, but generally it doesn't if you do it right.
Totally. Well, again, like we said, we could talk about each of these pieces forever, but appreciate you taking your time at the beginning of the quarter. Like you said, where heroes are made. Like I said, you're going to be way less stressed if you start thinking about these things now instead of just when the guns to your head at the end of the quarter of the year. But no, this was a ton of fun, Ed. And yeah, folks want to get in touch with you. What's the best way?
LinkedIn by a long way. So just look me up. I am the only Ed Armishaw in the world on LinkedIn, so it's nothing easy. So yeah, connect me there, follow me there, whatever you want to do. I'm relatively active, ups and downs, as is always the case with busy day job. But yeah, I'm there. So and post about all sorts of different things aligned to this topic. So hopefully people will gain something today. They can come look me up there.
Totally. Well, appreciate the time, Ed. Thanks again.
Cool. Take care, Ross.